I'm Drew Stevenson, and this is for my administrative law class. And here I want to talk about one of the exceptions to the Administrative Procedure Act's requirement that agencies promulgate regulations through public notice and comment periods. And this exception allows agencies to skip that step and go right to promulgating a final rule. And this is the good cause exception. So that's what I'm going to be talking about here. Let's dive in. So under APA 553B, there's an exception, and it says that the notice and comment requirement for regulations or informal rulemaking is not required if the agency finds good cause. And then it lists things like that it's impracticable, unnecessary, or would be contrary to the public interest to do a public comment period before having the rule go into effect. And now the findings and reasons for the rule and for what they're claiming is the good cause for why the exception applies are supposed to be incorporated into the rule at promulgation. In other words, this isn't something that you can do after the fact, sort of post hoc. Oops, we forgot to do the public comment period. How about now we think there was a good reason for it? At the outset, you have to invoke the good cause exception. Now, before I get into exactly how this works for the agency or how often it occurs, let's talk a little bit about what the courts think of this. The circuits vary on the standard of review that they use. Some, like the DC Circuit Court of Appeals, actually use de novo review, which is a very rigorous standard of review for deciding whether the agency properly invoked that exemption and whether it applies, or if they have to start all over again and go through regular notice and comment rulemaking. Others, like the Fifth Circuit, use the arbitrary and capricious standard. There was a study done by the GAO in 2012 that found that agencies were invoking this good cause exception to the notice and comment rulemaking requirements pretty frequently when it came to informal rulemaking. 35% of the major rules, 44% of non-major rules were promulgated without prior notice and invoking some exception. And out of those, the good cause exception was the one most frequently used or invoked by the agencies in 77% of the cases for major rules and 61% for non-major rules. So basically, agencies, this is their favorite exception to the notice and comment rulemaking requirements and how they can kind of leapfrog over that. Now, remember that in the text of the APA for this good cause exception, it sets forth basically three types or versions of it, that it's impracticable. And that could be that, for example, we're using this one usually when there's a statutory deadline or time constraint, like Congress has said by December 31st or the end of this year or the end of the next calendar year, the agency must promulgate a regulation about such and such. And so the agency is rushing against this congressional mandate that they promulgate a rule by a certain date. So in that case, they might say it's impracticable. It's not feasible for them to take a few months to do a public comment period. Then there's the contrary to public interest version of the good cause exception. And this is generally used for emergencies or threats to public safety during a pandemic or a national security crisis or something like that. And then there's that it would be unnecessary. And this is usually used for, let's say, a technical correction to a rule or rules with statutorily applied prescribed content. In other words, sometimes Congress passes a statute and the statute kind of just spells out in mechanical detail what the regulation is going to have to provide. So the agency is doing little more than copying and pasting from Congress's own statute into their regulation. Well, in that case, there's no real question about whether the agency is winging it or veering too far from congressional intent. They're following lockstep with what Congress told them to do, so it would be unnecessary. And there are times where we have something that has been updated. For example, that you had a regulation that was promulgated before the age of the internet and cell phones. And so it's talking about transmission with fax machines and courier services. So they just need to make a basic update like that that's kind of trivial, but is helpful given the changed world that we live in. It doesn't change the substance of what the rule requires, but it maybe uses some updated language. So those are our general three categories. So of the 92 examples that were done in this GAO study in 2012, 36 involved these statutory deadlines that I was talking about. 31 involved statutorily prescribed content. Basically, the statute dictated what the agency had to include in the regulation, virtually word for word. And then 19 were what they would call against the public interest or emergencies. And in some cases, the categories can overlap. So let's talk about this category of it's unnecessary and this idea of direct final rulemaking. And the concept here is the agency will promulgate a rule and announce that the rule goes into immediate effect, but there's a proviso that they put in there that says that they will withdraw it and initiate a full notice and comment period if there are a lot of negative comments received during a different period. So instead of doing the public comment period, notice and comment rulemaking, where they have a public comment period, they wait a few months, they gather the comments, and then they issue a final rule. Here, they'll just issue the final rule and say, here, we're going to have a period of a few weeks or a few months for people to submit comments. And if the comments are too negative, we are offering to just start over again, and we'll withdraw the rule and do it the old-fashioned way. And so this kind of operationalizes the unnecessary exception when the rule is expected to be uncontroversial. And a lot of agency rules are. They're not things that people find burdensome or difficult. They're just clarifying what you have to do or which form to use for something, things like that. But that brings us to our next sort of topic here of interim final rulemaking, which sometimes we abbreviate IFR. And this is where the agency invokes the good cause exception to notice and comment rulemaking to promulgate a rule without any prior comment period. But then when they do that, they announce that they are voluntarily, maybe as a matter of grace, they'll receive and consider comments even though the rule is already in effect. And again, if the comments are too negative, they might change their minds about what to do. And note that the agencies have a strong incentive to do this. And the outcome, though, is that the rule may become permanent if the comments don't really nudge the agency towards a change. Now, when it comes to these interim final rules or IFRs, keep in mind it's going to be easier for the agency to convince court later that's reviewing the way they went about making this rule that the pre-promulgation notice and comment was impracticable or contrary to the public interest if they go ahead and still have a comment period, even though the rule is already in effect. So courts are sympathetic to the idea that the public didn't lose anything if there's a public comment period. They still get to submit their comments. The agency is still going to consider them. It's just that the only difference with an interim final rule and the normal or regular method is that you would normally have a proposed rule that hasn't gone into effect yet during the comment period. And here the rule is already in effect, but the rule could be modified or rescinded depending on how the comment period plays out. What started happening more and more is that agencies would invoke good cause and issue an interim final rule with no prior notice or public comment period. And then, even though they've already issued an interim final rule that's already binding and legally enforceable, they then have their comment period. And then at some point, they go ahead and promulgate a final rule that replaces the interim final rule, but it's usually very similar to the interim final rule. So we have all the same kind of building blocks of the process. We have an initial publication, we have a public comment period, and we have a final rule that's responsive to the comments. The question is whether those first two things can be done contemporaneously. In a regular notice and comment rulemaking, you have a proposed rule, a public comment period, and then a final rule. For IFRs, the final rule is an interim final rule is proposed and is in effect and is enforceable during the comment period itself. Some commentators have criticized this widespread practice of using interim final rules, arguing that it can be tainted or a sham because the agencies are basically pre-committed to a policy course, and the argument is that the comment period is just an empty show. Or they'll argue that there's regulatory inertia. Once they've announced a rule and that they're already enforcing it or implementing it, there's a disincentive to change course or reverse course. So they're less likely to deviate from their initial position. And because everybody kind of understands this on some level, the argument is that citizens will be less incentivized to submit comments during the public comment period if the rule is already in effect, that everyone will realize that this is meaningless. On the other hand, the arguments in favor of this interim final rule method are that an actual notice and comment process occurs, and it doesn't really matter if it occurs while the rule is in effect. We're still getting the same value, the same public participation and opportunity to be heard. And the interim final rule's validity or lack thereof only affects the interim final rule itself and enforcement actions during that, not really the later final rule. And so once we have a final rule, there's not really a question or a challenge to this procedural step. Now, there was a period for a few years where some of the circuit courts were trying to apply this middle ground approach, they called it, or the open mind doctrine, basically saying that the final rule would be valid only if the agency was still approaching things with an open mind and would actually give weight to the comments submitted during the comment period and weren't just going to ignore them completely or not bother reading them, and they would demand some evidence. So if you were one of those courts, it was a bad look if the final rule and the interim final rule were verbatim. It looked like they had just taken the interim final rule, done a hoax of a public comment period, and then republished the same document as a final rule. So some circuit courts had started to use that approach in the 2010s. Then we get to the Supreme Court with a case called Little Sisters of the Poor v. Pennsylvania in 2020. And I have a separate video about that I want my students to watch. It really explains the case and what they did about these interim final rules and the closed mind issue. Basically, the court there decisively rejected this approach of requiring evidence that the agency maintained an open mind during the comment period after doing an IFR that some of the circuit courts have been using. So they're not supposed to do that anymore after the Little Sisters of the Poor versus Pennsylvania in 2020. So prior imposition of an interim final rule has no effect on the validity of the final rule that eventually follows, that subsequently has undergone a full notice and comment period. So the upshot is that agencies now, according to the Supreme Court, are definitely allowed to use interim final rules and have the rule go into effect and be implemented while the public comment period, the notice and comment period, is going on. In other words, we're kind of skipping the notice and going right to rule with a comment period, and maybe we'll withdraw it if we want. That's the interim final rule. And so because this allows agencies to hurry up and skip some steps or save some time, we're probably going to see agencies doing it more after that Supreme Court holding in Little Sisters of the Poor. And that concludes my quick discussion or overview of the good cause exception to the notice and comment rulemaking requirements that would normally apply to informal rulemaking under the Administrative Procedure Act under Section 553. Thanks for watching.